Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the York Civil War Roundtable for November 17th, 2021. It's hard to believe we've reached November already. Holidays are just around the corner, but thank you to everyone for attending tonight. And I think we have a great program laid out for us, a very timely one that'll probably get us already in the mood for the holidays. I'd just like to thank the participation, the partnership that we have with the York Civil War Roundtable. Kathy Friel, Program Director, Scott Mingus and Scott Rosenau, Assistant Program Directors. We certainly are very happy to continue this partnership. And, we've, for the last few months, the History Center has been happy to host this. It's been tough not to be able to do these in person. But I'd just like to go ahead and share a message if I can advance my slide here. I spoke with Kathy yesterday, and she sent a message to me that she wanted me to convey to everybody who's out there tonight, just to remember that this is our November meeting, and traditionally, in previous years and in this year, we will not be meeting as a roundtable in December. So please keep that in mind so that, the third Wednesday night in December, you're not scurrying to get onto Zoom or onto Facebook. We will be back in January, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. But also, in addition to that, Kathy wants to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. And she's upset. It's been tough in working in the background to schedule speakers like Mr. Jessberger tonight and not be able to meet them in person. And obviously, the camaraderie that we are used to from meeting in person is a little bit harder to do on Zoom, although we have a little bit of it in the Q&A, but not quite the same thing. So I'm sure I'm not alone in hoping that, and I know that Kathy feels even stronger than I do, that we're going to be able to find some sort of normal next year and return to in person in 2022, whatever that might look like. So some upcoming events, as we usually do, coming attractions, which, if you can bear with me, we'll do those for the benefit of the History Center. Just have a few events to talk about tonight, although there are a few other ones going on, but these are the ones we wanted to feature. Coming up this coming Tuesday, right in time for Thanksgiving, Christine Cooper, our manager of public programs, will be presenting sausage and apples as part of her early American cooking demonstration that takes place at the Colonial Complex of the History Center on November 23rd at 11 o'clock in the morning. In the month of December, which is, it seems like it's far, but it's really not that far away. Our first Friday, I'm sorry, not even first Friday yet, December 2nd, it's Thursday night, December 2nd at 7 p.m., we will be hosting our Writers Roundtable, which is a History Center Library event. And please join us as the Mayor of York, Michael Helfrich, will be joining us to discuss the life and work of York photographer Glenalvon Goodrich, who is a pioneer in photography, for those of you who recognize that name or don't recognize that name. So Mayor Helfrich will be discussing that with the Writers Roundtable. Then on Friday, December 3rd, starting at 5:30 and going through 8 p.m. that night at the Colonial Complex, we will be having a candlelight tour and discussion of Christmas celebrations in the 18th century. So a little bit before tonight's time period, but again, just something we can do to get into the mood of the season. Next month, right after the start of the new year, January 2nd, Sunday, January 2nd at 2:30 in the afternoon, we'll be welcoming back the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogical Society, which will be welcoming Mark Schurmeyer, president of SA Architects, and he will be presenting a lecture on the Dempwolf family of architects and their architecture in York County. So anybody that's done any kind of research at all, or just from growing up in the area, you're going to recognize the Dempwolf name. Their legacy is written across the city of York and across many buildings throughout York County and in surrounding counties, and in Maryland and in Washington, D.C., and a bunch of other places. So please keep that in mind for January 2nd after you get through all of your pork and sauerkraut. Then the question that's probably on many people's minds is, we're not having a meeting in December. What's going on in January? So hard to believe we're only 2 months away from January, but here we are. January 19th, we will be returning. The Civil War Roundtable will be returning on Zoom at 7:00 p.m. And we'll be welcoming Dr. Bradley Gottfried, who will be presenting Hell Comes to Southern Maryland, the story of the Point Lookout Civil War Prisoner of War Camp. The Point Lookout Civil War Prisoner of War Camp was the largest in the North. Over 52,000 men were imprisoned there from 1863 through 1865, and at the end, there were over 20,000 men occupying a small 20-acre pen. The abrupt creation of the camp in mid-1863, coupled with the influx of Confederates captured at Gettysburg, taxed the logistics of the Union High Command and created a hellish environment for the prisoners. Some have called Point Lookout the Andersonville of the North. This presentation will explain why the camp was located close to Washington, the logistical issues surrounding the camp, how the men lived and died, and why its story is important. So starting 2020 off with 2022, with a bit of a somber story, but something that we haven't focused on a whole lot in the recent months. So I hope everyone will join us for that in 2 months' time. So without further ado, I'd like to do an introduction for tonight's speaker, Michael Jesberger, who will be presenting A Soldier's Civil War Christmas. Mr. Jesberger is an independent military historian who specializes in the American Revolution and Civil War time periods. He frequently provides formal lectures, living history presentations, and tours of historic sites in the tri-state area. A member of numerous history-based organizations and active in the reenactment community, he participates in numerous battle reenactments, living history programs, and ceremonies to honor our first and current veterans. A lifelong resident of the Philadelphia region, Mr. Jesberger is a native of Northeast Philadelphia and has relocated to Bucks and Montgomery County, PA, and currently resides in Lansdale with his wife, Amy, son, Eric, and 2 daughters, Erin and Emma. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and I will turn things over.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to bring up my slideshow here real quick. Just one moment. You can let me know if that screen's up.
Looks great.
Awesome. Again, thank you, Adam, for the hospitality and the welcome. No stranger to your organizations. I've spoken several times at for various groups. I think I spoke there on the Hessians, the prisoners of war, a few years back, and certainly the imprint that Camp Security and the impact there in New York on the American Revolution. And then also for the roundtable, I think 2 or 3 times, and I want to thank Kate for the invitation, if I'm not mistaken, one on the Hunley and one on Lincoln. So again, a choice, a topic, a well-timed topic. I'm sure many of folks in the area are preparing and packing to be heading out to Gettysburg for Remembrance Day weekend, just in a few short days. We just celebrated and reflected on the sacrifice of our first veterans with Veterans Day last week. And I just want to say, I thought it was beautiful. What a beautiful week of weather to help people prepare. Anybody involved with cutting a lawn or laying a wreath or making sure that a grave or a cemetery or something looked nice, the weather really did help contribute. As we turn the page now, get closer to Thanksgiving and the impending coming holiday, my favorite time of year, and so many as well. Again, great opportunity here to be with you all. And on that note, I'd like to thank any veteran. If anyone is in the audience, a veteran yourself or a spouse, or if you have an ancestor that fought in the American Civil War or a prior war, or even if you have someone currently serving in your family. That's the way I start every program, every tour, any type of time I'm in public. I like to thank veterans. It's important that we continue to do that. So again, great choice here. This is a program that kind of was inspired by what we miss, Adam, what you just said, camaraderie, people being together at a round table fighting over the raffle and that last book on the table. That is something that one year I was the last winner of a raffle, and the only thing left were the scraps. It was an older book, a magazine, a Civil War Times Illustrated magazine. I couldn't tell you the date, but some fascinating articles on Christmas. It was probably like a November, December magazine, and it had some articles on Christmas in the American Civil War. And then being a reenactor myself, I'm always around the hobby. Funny though, this time of year, the Civil War hobby kind of goes dormant after Remembrance Day weekend. That's kind of like the end of the year. And then being very lucky that I can do 2 time periods, I branch off into Trenton, the Crossing, and Princeton. And, when I think of Christmas, it's typically, Revolutionary War, Washington crossing the Delaware and the 9 Mile March to Trenton and things like that. So interesting there. I saw you have a program coming up on a colonial Christmas. I may need to tune in for that one because that's something that I'm also very interested in. But for the American Civil War, it's a little different, I think. And again, being so close to Gettysburg and, for us, it's a skip and a drive away to spend a weekend over the holiday season. And it's beautifully decorated. So what a great topic here tonight. So for a nation, a country that was devastated and torn by the American Civil War, Christmas in the 1860s was observed with very much conflicting emotions on both sides. 19th century Americans embraced Christmas with all the Victorian traditions and trappings that have moved this holiday from a private and religious realm to a more public celebration, one of our biggest and one of our most favorite celebrations of the year as we look forward to it. Christmas cards were in circulation. Carol singing was common in public venues and sites. Greenery blanketed communities north and south. Christmas trees stood in places of honor in many homes, as poems about a jolly old elf who delivered toys to well-behaved children captivated Americans on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. However, Christmas also made the heartache and homesickness for lost loved ones more acute and brought it to front and center. As the American Civil War dragged on, deprivation repassed the familiar faces that were missing from around the family dinner table. Soldiers used to be bringing in the tree and caroling in church were instead now scavenging for firewood, trying to survive, singing drinking songs around the campfire, part of military life. And so the holiday celebration most associated with family and home was now a contradiction. It was a joyful, sad, religious, and subdued event. Before the American Civil War, Christmas was not an official holiday in the United States, nor was it celebrated uniformly across the country. In early New England, Christmas was looked down upon by Puritans and Calvinists who felt the day should be observed for strict fasts, rituals, if it was to be observed at all. During the 17th century, Massachusetts imposed a fine on colonists who celebrated the holiday. And after it became a state, its businesses and schools did not observe the holiday at all. Elsewhere, Christmas was celebrated in a variety of ways, most depending on the country of origin of the immigrants who celebrated it. By the mid-19th century, the holiday's importance and distance from religious tradition was already starting to grow. Songs and carols like Jingle Bells from 1857 and poems like A Visit from St. Nicholas from 1823 set the stage for a fun secular holiday that revolved around gift giving, the celebration of food and drink. Many of the holiday customs we associate with Christmas today were familiar to 1840 celebrants. Christmas cards were popularized during that decade, and Christmas trees were a stylish addition to the parlor. By the 1850s, Americans were singing It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, or O Little Town of Bethlehem, or Away in a Manger in public settings. The custom of Christmas trees seems to have originated in Germany, spread to England and other countries, and then to America. Queen Victoria described in her diary that the tree that her aunt had decorated in 1832 was something she remembered. In 1848, the Illustrated London News published an engraving of the royal family with their Christmas trees and presents. This engraving was Americanized and published in the 1850 Godney's Lady Book. The Christmas tree soon became more accepted and popular throughout the second half of the 19th century. Americans added more homemade and store-bought ornaments and began to prefer much larger trees that stood on the floor, moving away from the tabletop trees that were popular in Europe. By 1860, many worried about civil unrest, fearful this Christmas would be the last before the outbreak of war. An Arkansas diarist wrote, quote, Christmas has come around in the circle of time, but it is not a day of rejoicing. Some of the usual ceremonies are continuing, but there is gloom on the thoughts and countenance of all better portion of our people, end quote. At the Lincoln home in Springfield, Illinois, minimal decorations were used. After the children had gone to bed on Christmas Eve, Ruth Painter Randall, Lincoln's family biographers, the 1955 work, Lincoln's Sons, tells that the family was hanging Christmas stockings. Robert Lincoln, the oldest, was careful to not disturb the illusions of Willie and Tad, as they would be the ones who actually were waiting for the stockings to be filled. Fresh garlands of holly and evergreen were covered, mantles, chandeliers, and every nook and cranny, along with the sprig of mistletoe in a doorway to kiss their sweethearts. Popular gifts for boys were wooden toy guns, books, popcorn balls, candy, firecrackers, and noisemakers. Favorite gifts for adults were books, special note paper, pens, fancy perfume, and scented soaps. For the little girls, dolls, candy, snacks, things to sew, things to craft, books, primers. These holidays were a special time for these folks, and the food was just as important. A pre-war or 1860 Southern Christmas menu might consist of baked ham, turkey, oysters, salmon, vegetables that would have been stored for the upcoming winter, squash, cabbage, potatoes, sweet potatoes, turnips, celery, carrots, apples and pears, pickles, relish, breads, shortbread, apple pie, rice pudding, or gingerbread, with lemon curd for dessert. If the ham or turkey is felt to be too extravagant in the 1860s, one might consider a chicken fricassee or a chicken pie instead. Here you see a great class distinction, maybe between the very rich or those doing quite well and just a regular family trying to survive, waiting all year for this feast, a modest feast, but still a feast. Pre-war decorations utilized exotic fruits such as pineapples, lemons, limes, pomegranates, kumquats, along with the cuttings of holly, bayberry, chinaberry, mistletoe, ivy, and pine cones. Here you see some decorations. And the thing too about wintertime is, remember, in the harsh winters, especially in the Northeast, everything would be a blanket of white, and these fruits would stand out, with the feet of snow. Differences like that we don't see today. In 1860, as President-elect Lincoln received callers and dealt with cabinet issues, he was certainly concerned about the federal forts taken in the South. On December 20th, he received the shocking news that South Carolina had seceded from the Union by a vote of 169-0. And it starts the American Civil War. 7 southern states formed the Confederate States of America in the winter of 1861. Following the Union surrender at Fort Sumter, in mid-April. 4 more defections would follow. The Civil War had begun. Southern states seceded, and the Confederates claimed their first major victory at the Battle of Manassas in July of 1861. For the shopkeeper or the farm boy or the student away from home for Christmas, the first time in his life, either Union or Confederate, melancholy would begin to set in. Robert Gould Shaw, then a second lieutenant in the 2nd Massachusetts Infantry, writes about guard duty near Frederick, Maryland. He would later earn fame as the commander of the heroic African-American unit, 54th Massachusetts. He would write, quote, "It is Christmas morning, and I hope a happy and merry one for you all. Though it looks so stormy for our poor country, one can hardly be in merry humor," end quote. James Holloway, writing from Drainesville, Virginia, tells his family that Christmas was like this, quote, "You have no idea how lonesome I feel this day. It is the first time in my life I'm away from loved ones at home," end quote. On the civilian front, Sally Brock Putnam describes Christmas of 1861 from Richmond, Virginia. Quote, "Never before had so sad a Christmas dawned upon us. Our religious services were not remitted, and the Christmas dinner was plenteous of old, but in nothing did it remind us of days gone by. We had neither the heart nor inclination to make the week merry with joyousness when such a sad calamity hovered over us," end quote. But the men made the most of it. Christmas of 1861 saw soldiers full of bravado, still relatively well-fed and well-equipped, and eagerly anticipating Christmas boxes of treats from home. Often officers authorized extra rations of spirits, and men engaged in greased pig chasing contests, foot races, jumping matches, and impromptu pageants dressed up as women. Soldiers erected small evergreen trees strung with hardtack and pork. Some were excused from drill, although other references point to the need to haul logs and forage for firewood, no matter what day of the year it was. The first Christmas in the White House in 1861, there is no evidence that the Lincolns had a Christmas tree, no extensive decorations, no lighting ceremonies, no holiday programs. Christmas was a normal workday for the president, except for an evening dinner with the family and friends. Christmas certainly would be a sad occasion on several, as Eddie had died in 1850. Eddie's empty chair in the family circle, together with continuing war worries, dampened holiday spirits in the White House for the next coming Christmas seasons. On Christmas morning, Lincoln held an important cabinet meeting, but was able to entertain a large number of dinner guests by evening. For her part, the First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln, spent every Christmas between 1861 and 1864 caring for the wounded soldiers at Campbell's and Douglas Hospital. She raised $1,000 for Christmas dinners, and when she heard there was the possible attack of scurvy, she donated a similar amount of oranges and lemons. Not publicized were gifts of liquor delivered at the White House that Mary sent directly to the hospitals for medicinal purposes. As the Civil War's first Christmas neared, a pair of young lovers, Nathaniel Dawson and Elodie Todd, a Confederate soldier and his eventual bride, wrote to one another with increasing melancholy. They were separated by hundreds of miles, and their communication was often interrupted by delays in the mail and the desperation of the war itself. Quote, "I wish I could be with you at Christmas, the festal season, where age is rejuvenated and lives again in the merry carols of youth," end quote. Dawson wrote to Todd, sister of Mary Todd Lincoln, on December 22nd, 1861. On the holiday itself, he wrote to describe his regiment's rowdy celebration. He says, quote, "Bad whiskey is abundant, and pleasure and sorrow drowned in large portions," end quote, he said. Dawson and Todd's lives changed dramatically during the war as the Confederacy crumbled and their personal lives stretched to their limits. But they weren't alone in wishing they could celebrate Christmas together. As the fractured United States fought, the holiday took on a new meaning. In the antebellum South, plantation owners used the holiday as a way to show off their paternalism towards the people they enslaved. During lengthy Christmas celebrations, they gave enslaved people passes to marry, they provided extra food and alcohol, and gave gifts. But the Civil War disrupted not just the relations between plantation owners and the people they enslaved, but those within families and communities. As both sides shifted their resources towards the war, the ability to give gifts and celebrate was dramatically curtailed. People cast their decision to have a more modest Christmas and celebrate this patriotic holiday in a more subdued way. And the children also got caught up in the act of a patriotic Christmas. Instead of giving and receiving store-bought gifts, they made more humble gifts, like popcorn balls or crude homemade toys. And they learned to temper their expectations of Santa Claus and what he would deliver. A crotchety slave told the Hal Cobb children not to expect a visit from St. Nicholas this year because the Yankees had shot him, according to historian James Martin. While other parents offered more sensitive explanations, as a Yankee, Santa would be held up by Confederate pickets, or perhaps blockading vessels had interrupted his annual journey to deliver toys, was one excuse delivered by parents. Meanwhile, those children's mothers, aunts, and sisters experienced Christmas as an agonizing reminder of the danger faced by the men who had gone off to war. Civil War era diaries and letters document how many women felt anxiety, grief, and depression around the Christmas holiday. In 1861, Margaret Cahill wrote to her husband, Thomas, a Union officer. She said that she felt nervous and lonely, that she could not write to him this Christmas. She says, quote, "Will you say, why did you not write to me on this Christmas day?" She wrote. "Well, to tell you the truth, I was just not able. I miss you that much." On the battlefield, men on both sides tried to celebrate Christmas by giving gifts, eating, drinking, and by taking time off. In his memoir, James Wright, a sergeant in the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Infantry Regiment, recalls eating beef soup and greeting his fellow soldiers on Christmas in the Union camp. He recalled, quote, "The men had been allowed as much liberty as consistent with discipline and were circulating around the camp among their acquaintances in other regiments. I was frequently invited to smile or take a drink," end quote. In 1862, this sad year brought forth the war's impact full force, with battles at Shiloh, Manassas, and Antietam, and campaigns in the Shenandoah Valley and the peninsula. Many Fredericksburg, Virginia citizens were homeless or fled the town just prior to Christmas. To help deal with the sadness of being away for Christmas, officers of the 20th Tennessee gave their men a barrel of whiskey to mark the festive day. One participant wrote, quote, "We had many a drunken fight and knockdown before the day closed to an end quote. But there were other more somber occurrences recorded for Christmas in 1862. One account tells of soldiers being forced to witness an execution for desertion. And another grim letter describes how men firing their weapons in a funeral salute were mistakenly punished for unauthorized holiday merrymaking. Mourning attire and vacant chairs were all too familiar in the homes of many Americans by the Christmas of 1862. Mrs. Putnam recorded that even the children rarely made mention of the holiday feeling. Instead, the keen loss of some family member or friend is what they talked about. Harper's Weekly depicted a tender reunion scene of a soldier, husband, and father briefly reunited with his family during his furlough. Holiday boxes and barrels from home containing food, clothing, and small articles of comfort were highly anticipated by the soldiers, and they looked forward to receiving these items. Perhaps at no other time where the shortages of the South felt more keenly than during Christmas. Mothers who successfully overcame shortages of every known item took pride in making crude makeshift substitutions, were now often reduced to tears when Christmas came and they were not able to provide expected gifts or food for their children. Many Southern parents were gently preparing their children that, once again, Santa Claus will not make it through the Union blockade. This scenario was played out at homes across the South to such an extent that a book was written to explain why Santa did not always visit the little Southern children during the war. Emily Sinkler, a Northern woman who had married and moved south before the war, described Christmas in the 1840s as being an elaborate affair celebrated with family, presents for all under the Christmas tree, which was lighted with wax candles. She mentioned decorations and presents for the children also being hung on the tree. She and her husband followed the custom of allowing the servants to indulge in a week of frolic at Christmas, complete with dancing, the killing of an ox for their holiday feast, and providing them with rice, sugar, and coffee. Depending on their duty assignment, Christmas dinner may have consisted of only crackers, hardtack, rice, beans, and possibly a single piece of salted beef for the soldiers. Those lucky enough to receive boxes from home would supplement a meal with possible other additions. So, as I previously mentioned, this coming week, the end of the week here, we are going to celebrate one of the most important events during the American Civil War, when Lincoln would travel to Gettysburg in 1863 and deliver his Gettysburg Address. So for us, certainly we are familiar. (1863) saw the battles of Gettysburg, the siege at Vicksburg, and for a brief time in that summer, the mood in the North looked forward to a possible end of the war. When Lincoln, relieved at the victory of Vicksburg and Gettysburg within a day, spoke to joyous townspeople in Washington about the possible ending of the war. These 1-2 events certainly must mean that the war possibly could come to an end. But as we all know, that Army of Northern Virginia under Robert E. Lee would escape and come back to fight another day. And indeed, they would come back in September at Chickamauga and Chattanooga. As Thanksgiving approached in 1863, Lincoln would speak to the American public on November 19th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Popular media did its best to increase the morale of both soldiers and their families at home around Christmas. Harper's Weekly, the most popular periodical at the time, published a variety of stories and illustrations during the war. So I am very proud to be able to show you some of those this evening, even 1 or 2 in color. Although not the first to pen an image of Santa, Thomas Nast probably did more to popularize the image than anyone else. His first illustration of Santa appeared in 1863, drawn in 1862, but not published until 63. It portrayed Santa in a patriotic outfit with striped pants, a star-spangled jacket reflecting his support for the Union as well as Nast. Santa, shown in the picture, you got to look here. You got to look real close. I'm circling it for you. That's Santa holding up a Jefferson Davis doll with a rope around his neck. Propaganda at its best. Abraham Lincoln would later refer to a politicized Santa as the best recruiting sergeant the North ever had. More moderate illustrations show soldiers decorating camps with greens and firing salutes to Santa. Ironically, it was Nast who fixed Santa's home and toy workshop address at the North Pole. So no nation can claim him as their own. President Lincoln is said to have been so favorably impressed by Nast's efforts to portray Santa in a patriotic light. Also equally well received was Nast's image of Santa, which appeared in Harper's Weekly in January of 1881. This image is still one of the best known images of Santa Claus. One of the dreariest, saddest accounts of Christmas during the American Civil War came from Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Cavada, captured at Gettysburg, and writing about Christmas in 1863 from the Libby prison in Richmond. He says, quote, "The north wind comes reeling in fitful gushes through the iron bars and jingles the sleigh bell in the prisoner's ear and puffs in his pale face with a breath suggestively of odorous eggnog." Cavada continued, "Christmas Day, a day which was made for smiles, not sighs, for laughter, not tears, for the hearth, not a prison." He continues to describe a makeshift dinner set on a tea-told covered box. Each prisoner brought his own knife and fork and drank eau de James, water from the nearby James River, as he called it. Cavada reported that he combed his hair for the occasion and further related that the prisoners staged a ball with a great deal of bad dancing, during which hats were crushed and trousers were torn. Sentries called for the men to have lights out at 9 p.m., thus ending the party. Eggnog, a staple, sometimes served with the accompaniment of spirits, was standard in most homes during the holiday season until the war made even such a simple sample a luxury out of reach for most Southerners. In 1863, a Confederate soldier from North Carolina wrote to his mother asking for a bottle of brandy and some sugar so he could make eggnog for his fellow soldiers. Confederate nurse Kate Cummings was up well before daylight making eggnog for the hospital in which she worked. She was unable to procure enough eggs to serve everyone, so the holiday treat was given to the wounded, the cooks, and the nurses. The doctor had done his best to provide a holiday meal, which consisted of turkeys, chickens, vegetables, and pies. But Kate's delight with the meal was continued due to her knowledge that the men in the field had not fared as well. If you were to follow the diary of a young nurse, Elvira Powers, she served as a nurse in military hospitals in Louisville and Nashville area. Here are her thoughts just prior to Christmas of 1863. Christmas evening, our dinner was truly a success. It was given by the Sanitary Commission principally, and a portion from the hospital fund. Much less stir was made about it, and one soldier expressed the general feeling who said he enjoyed the Christmas dinner the most, for there wasn't so much style about it. Very excellent oyster soup for the light diet was given each time. 2,100 pies were issued for dinner, 71 cans of oysters with 1,800 pounds of beef, and 4 barrels of pickles. Floride Clemson, granddaughter of John Calhoun, was typical of prominent families who endured shortages because of the war. She noted in 1863 that her only gift at Christmas was a pair of sleeve buttons. What a difference a year made in her outlook upon the holiday season. The highlight of the giving was in receiving a letter from a loved one for herself while filling the children's stockings with crude homemade treats. Stone family made no observance of the holiday in 1863 other than preparing an eggnog which the family found no joy in. She recalled consoling a child the previous Christmas, telling her that once again Santa would not get through the Union blockade and bring the usual gifts as in years past. An easy excuse, but one that was repeated. Citizens found the comfort of the soldiers to be foremost in their minds, and nameless quantities of food found their way to the camps to try and cheer up the soldiers who would not know the comfort of their families' love on that holy night. Items mentioned being sent to the soldiers were hams, pickles, eggnog, pound cake, while citizens' tables were now devoid of such fare. The food that was desired was now being sent to the front. The families were giving up what they so cherished around that time of year. John Jones noted in 1863 it was a sad, snowy season. Thoughts were on the soldiers whose thoughts would do little to warm their hearts as these men grieved for home. Mrs. Jones' children had decorated their parlor with evergreens, crosses, and stars. The focus on their efforts was a decorated cedar tree. The family was not able to enjoy turkey, but Mr. Jones stated it was no loss that the family had no heart to partake in this holiday at any time. He stated that the tree would be sparsely decorated since candy was now selling at $8 a pound, almost an entire month's pay for a Confederate private. In 1864, the final wartime Christmas came as the Confederacy floundered. Lee's army behind entrenchments in Petersburg and Richmond. Abraham Lincoln received the most unusual holiday gift, the city of Savannah, Georgia, presented by William T. Sherman via telegram. This would be one of the most famous Christmas gifts delivered by Union General, the capturing of Savannah, Georgia in December of 1864, a significant military achievement that marked the beginning of the end of the war, and sent Abraham Lincoln a telegram that said, quote, "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah with 150 guns and plenty of ammunition, and also about 25,000 bales of cotton," end quote. Union and Confederate sympathizers were hoping this Christmas would be the last at conflict. Certainly a very poignant Christmas gift for both soldier and civilian, and for the president. Johnny Green of the 4th Kentucky Orphans Brigade expressed the same sentiment. Peace on earth, goodwill to men should prevail. We certainly would preserve the peace if they would go home and leave us alone, end quote. Holiday season charity was not forgotten this year. On Christmas Day, 90 Michigan men and their captain loaded up wagons with food and supplies and distributed them to destitute civilians in the Georgia countryside. The Union Santa Clauses, as they were called, tied tree branches to the heads of mules to remember and resemble the popularity of reindeer. These Union soldiers did that. So as 1864 would come to an end with promise and great hope, the moods were buoyant in Washington, in New York, in Philadelphia. When on April 9th, 1865, the war began to come to an end with the surrender at Appomattox. The celebrants, 3 months after Christmas, were still full of the food and the celebration. But once again, we are reminded of the tragedy of that war. Days after the surrender at Appomattox, that president that led us through those Christmases would be assassinated. And it would shock the nation. The nation would mourn like never before through the spring and summer of 1865. The war had ended. And many soldiers had been mustered out of service. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution became law on December 18th, 1865, abolishing the institution of slavery. Soldiers and civilians alike were ready to reunite with their families and once again embrace that Victorian holiday custom. At the end of the hostilities, commerce once again would flow. It would flow southward, and goods would fill northern shops. And maybe this particular year, people could actually enjoy this holiday. The soldiers would come home. They would come home to stay. Long-held holiday traditions would be reintroduced as ornamental greens and trees filled the markets and toys would be on display in shops. Newspaper illustrations were of domestic and wintry scenes, no more from the front, no more from the battlefield. Though individual traditions still varied, the upheaval of the Civil War made the holiday seem more and more important to families that were isolated, separated because of the war, and eventually reunited. Historian David Anderson writes, quote, "The Christmas scene that reminded mid-19th century Americans of its importance, the importance of home and its associations of home and of our invented traditions." When the American Civil War ended, the magazines and newspapers that had underlined the importance of the holiday kept promoting it. And these reunited families that were devastated by the losses and struggles of the war cherished it. They never forgot it. They never forgot those years of the American Civil War and what Christmas was like, how bad it could be. But they cherished it. In 1870, in the aftermath of the war, Congress passed the first federal holiday law, making Christmas a traditional official holiday. 4 years of war had changed the holiday from a loose interpreted celebration to an essential one. The way that Americans observed the holiday changed as well, setting the stage for the more modern Christmas holiday that we know today. The final verse of a poem by the Christmas Hearth, published in the Christmas edition of Harper's Weekly, reflected the sentiments of many from that time. ought it not be a Merry Christmas, even with all the sorrow that hangs and will forever hang over so many households, even while war still rages, even while there are serious questions yet to be settled? Ought it not to be, and is it not, a Merry Christmas? With that, I'd like to thank Adam and Kate for the invitation. And as you move forward over the next several months, remember the sacrifice of veterans, all veterans, not just American Civil War, our Revolutionary War, our more modern veterans, and those still currently serving. And if you are out certainly at Gettysburg this weekend, certainly take a moment to reflect at one of my favorite places. And as I say, thank you and happy holidays.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. I think it's very great. It's great that you were able to do this tonight in preparation for Remembrance Day. And I hope some people out there might be able to attend those. It's been a long time since I did one.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I have to say, again, I know I was a call up the bullpen, but I mean, a well-placed topic that I think hits veterans, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and then this coming again week with Gettysburg and the celebration out there. That kind of all times into that period. Again, a sacrifice of what these soldiers went through. So I will come out of the share here and bring us back. But again, thank you for the invitation. Different type of topic, not a lot of casualties, not a lot of movements, more of it's kind of similar to my Civil War baseball program.
We had one earlier this year, actually, on that subject. That's interesting. I'm glad there's some other interest out there for it. Bruce Allardyce, I don't know if you know his name. He's from the Chicago area. He spoke about baseball and the Civil War back in May, I think, this year.
Very similar. Again, a topic that is kind of always there. The boys played, but again, very similar to this program where before the war, the baseball was not mostly organized, but the war makes it explode. We got 150,000 men in an army, and the boys playing in the game. By 1876, the National League is formed. Some can say out of the trauma of the war, because the men were looking for something to do. This here is one that you take it away and you lose it. It became almost like, oh boy, how much we missed that. Like, again, listen, ask any veteran on this call. They can tell you exactly where they were if they missed a Christmas. And ask a family member if they remember that open table and that space, and they'll tell you they remember it. So that's nothing that you can take for granted. And I tried to balance that here this evening with some good, maybe smile or laugh once in a while, especially with the blockade, keeping Santa back, but also some, remembrances of difficult times as well that all veterans struggle with.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you again. Yeah.
Well, we have some time for questions from those who are out there tonight. So if you have anything that you've been holding on to for a while, please feel free to put it into the chat or into the Q&A. And I will also check our live stream on Facebook and see if anybody is posting questions there.
Also, Adam, I'd like to say, these Zoom programs, isn't just myself and you, driving the boat. If anybody has a comment about Christmas and just what we mentioned, a veteran or being away, again, if you're a veteran or remember a family member, it's something that I'd like to open up dialogue as well about comments. It was funny on that same Civil War baseball program, how we talked about people's love of the game, a memory, of a great grandfather or something like that. So maybe that platform as well. I don't know how many questions about tonight's program there may be, but since we're all together here in a different format, as I said, this one, I'm one of you guys. I belong to the Del Valle Roundtable, and I won 5th in a book raffle, and that was the only thing left. And here we are tonight. So you never know what inspires. Yeah. Matter of fact, I borrowed some of that from that. There's some great books and podcasts and articles out there, blogs and such on Civil War Christmas tradition. Again, you guys being closer than Gettysburg than I am, you can understand about what takes place out there after this weekend.
Right.
I felt the impact of the Harper's Weekly articles, I think, were absolutely imperative. Even to share a story with you tonight. Again, the funny thing, about these programs, Adam and folks is like, you being in person is one thing, behind a podium with some backdrop, but staring at a screen or a phone for an hour, you almost have to be like an artist, painter. And there's not a lot of Civil War period pictures. Matter of fact, how many real photos of soldiers did I show you? Not many. Most, again, it's right. Very similar to the Revolutionary War programs that I do.
Right.
Paintings, images, accounts. But thankfully, the NASTs in illustrations just livened it up. And the one of the Jefferson Davis doll just, again, is just tells you the propaganda was kind of sneaking in there. Even Santa in red, white, and blue, he was on our side. It's, how can we lose? We have Santa.
I don't think I realized that Nast's first illustration is the patriotic one.
I believe the timeline is that progression.
Yeah. Where it makes sense. Yeah.
And what better way? I mean, that's like, like the crossing of the Delaware, you really got to look through it to see everything. There's so much going on in that image, but that it's hard to see the doll that he's holding and
right.
Giving out Jess Davis dolls. So again, probably went a long way with the troops when that ran through the newspaper. Propaganda. So thankfully there was that many interesting articles on that the illustrations, and Nast himself was quite good and a favorite of Lincoln. Sad, the Lincoln family. I know, again, just bouncing stuff off you guys. Very sad, the Lincoln family throughout, losing the three boys there. Very difficult. And then again, I hope I hit you between the eyes there when I said the nation starts to heal. The nation's recovering. The surrender at Appomattox. Here we go. World's great. We're back on. Well done, Lincoln.
Yeah.
Taken out. And I'll say this here real quick too. I did this program last year around this time of year, and Adam, I remember somebody saying to me, it was in person. I can't remember the organization, but it's a moot point. But it was emotional about people, and I wasn't here. I was not here in 1963. But somebody went back and said it was almost like the Kennedy assassination and the Christmas just outside a month. And
right. Absolutely.
That was kind of deep. Again, I wasn't here. I certainly know and read about it, but just the comparison that was made, I took it as a comment or a compliment, a powerful compliment about some of the emotion in tonight, about the period and the grieving, although Lincoln was in April, still that year was probably, I'm sure, just a somber with the president now who led us through those Christmases now taken out at, relatively young age. I thought that was an interesting contrast.
It is. And I haven't thought about that either, but I mean, it is almost exactly a month between Kennedy and Christmas that year. Yeah.
On that, it was funny when Kate reached out and she said, we normally do a Lincoln program, and that's spot on. I have several on Lincoln myself. The one I do on Lincoln at Gettysburg for this coming week, I talk about how, and again, when we're in person, it's so much easier to do this when you pan the audience and you get a grasp of the age of people. And some you guess and say similar to what I just said. I wasn't here. in 1963. But have you ever looked at the date, of the 100th anniversary at Gettysburg, November 19th, 1963? President Kennedy is invited to come to Gettysburg and speak. He does accept. And about a week or two before he's to come to Gettysburg on the 19th in 1963, his staff, his cabinet persuades him to change. You're better off going to the Deep South on the 22nd. He changes and he does cancel going to Gettysburg, and he goes to Dallas, Texas. And we know how that story goes. And that's an incredible part of our history. Yeah.
I didn't know that story.
Yeah, he was absolutely lined up to be the speaker. Think about it. The 100th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, who would be the best speaker? And he takes it, he accepts it. And then he changes his plans and he goes down to the South.
And that would have carried so much weight if he had chosen, not to mention the fact that he probably would have lived out his term, but it would have carried so much weight if he had been there at Gettysburg at the 100th anniversary of the address.
With his popularity and support and love that he had, that maybe hadn't been rivaled in some time, that would have been an amazing part of history that is forever changed. But again, it's why we meet, why we have these programs to talk about our incredible, fascinating American history.
Well, people are not as inquisitive as they usually are. So
no, not a problem. Not a problem.
Yeah, I don't see anything on Facebook either. So this is your last chance. Out there.
Yeah, well, I hope everyone liked it. That's not a sign, but no, I understand. It is a different off. Again, no statistics, no battles, no leaders. Right. It's
exactly
very similar to the baseball program.
Yeah, you start talking about any battle, and there are 5 different interpretations of every major decision that a commander makes. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us tonight, and for all your comments.
Adam, real pleasure. Again, nice meeting you. I appreciate your hospitality, getting me set up on this call, and also the other day to make sure we could meet and make sure we could get together and share this time together. And as I mentioned again, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. I do look forward to being with you all again, maybe in person down the line. I've spoken to you guys before, so I appreciate that. And again, to you, Adam, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Well, have a great Thanksgiving and happy holidays. And everybody out there, just remember, January is the 17th or the 19th. Let me check quickly here. It is the 19th. So January 19th, we will be back on Zoom. So we'll see you then. All right.
I might drive out for the sausage and apples. I might be coming out for that one.
Okay, that's Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it'll probably be cold enough. If it's the same thing that Christine made last weekend, we had an Articles of Confederation celebration at the Colonial Complex last weekend, and she made a sausage and apple dish. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but if it is, it might be worth driving in from Philly to do that.
All right, I hold you to it. Absolutely.
I highly enjoyed it. So
thank you. All right, guys. Thank you all.
All right. Have a great night.
Night.
Bye.